But right now, it's Representative Jeff Bradley from South Carolina. He represents District 123, which includes Beaufort and Jasper counties. Representative Bradley, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. How are you?
We're doing fantastic. So we got your article that you wrote in an op-ed in the Post and Couriers, where we saw it. You're talking about the use of artificial intelligence there in South Carolina to eliminate lots of these duplicative laws, particularly those that deal with regulations. I don't know what it's like in South Carolina there, Representative Bradley, but here in Mississippi, it's 3,000 bills a year that get introduced in our 90-day session. Of course, that gets trimmed down rather dramatically, but it's impossible for you guys to review all of these pages and gazillions of pages of legislative gobbledygook, honestly, and really understand that, hey, we already did that. We don't need to do that again. And you can't have enough lawyers to review all that. So tell us what you guys are doing.
Well, you know, it's an interesting point that you bring up, because what happens is, in order to get the legislation passed, you have to take the shortest track to get there. And so they exclude the difficult part of legislating what language needs to be there. They turn it over to the state agency, and then the state agency creates or promulgates a regulation. So when you get right down to it, it is we in the General Assembly that create the problem of the regulations by the very nature of us not taking the time to do it well on the front end. People are just interested in getting a bill passed, and they worry about it later. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify those duplicative regulations and do what we can to get rid of them. And what we've done, Gerard, is we have partnered with Google and what they did is they took, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk a bunch of gobbledygook words to your audience,
okay.
But they took our code of regulations and used that as a large language model. And then they dropped that into an AI. And the idea is we can work with that to define where there are duplicative regulations, and then we try and work to cut them out.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense because, as we said, and you make a point in your article about, man, we need to employ this at the federal level as well. I think about the mountains of pages of code across the federal government. Heck, just the IRS code unto itself is massive. You get into these big agencies, CMS, Medicare, Medicaid, DHS, all the above, another just monumental amount of code, pages of code. You know there's all kinds of overlap, and more than likely, Representative Bradley, I think you would agree, conflict within the code.
Yep. Well, and our code has 10 million words in it. You said you in your intro, you alluded to the number of lawyers that it would require to go through that, and that's why we're looking at the AI to help that. South Carolina is the worst offender in the nation. Is probably no surprise to you, is California. They have 412,000 do's and don'ts in their regulatory code. And the star of the country is Idaho, that has 15,000 do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
South Carolina is number 16 with 81,000 do's and don'ts. And that's where we're focused to try and reduce that by a quarter. That's our objective.
Okay.
So that's what the speaker told me he wanted me to do.
Yeah. So you said you've partnered with Google, and you're feeding your mountain of regs to the system to create an LLM, and then you'll use the various AI tools to search that LLM, and hopefully, Representative Bradley, that this would be used when drafting new legislation, right?
Yeah, one would think, but don't count on it. So we're guilty of the same thing. We didn't do 3,000 in 90 days, but we're good for 1,200 to 1,700 in any given session.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we get that. We get 3,000 introduced, and half of them may be renaming some bridge or something somewhere.
yeah,
And I'm not trying to
really,
downplay that. I'm just saying that all that gets mixed in. You get something like that, as you know, mixed in with something here in the state of Mississippi. We just passed major tax reform, which is extremely complex, but nonetheless, there's just a limited amount of time these guys have that working for us in our legislature to review all this stuff. You're likely to introduce something that possibly conflicts or overlaps.
yeah. Well, that's what we're trying to do. But we've got a lot of other stuff going on in South Carolina you might be
Yeah,
interested in. I know you
sure.
guys, y'all in Mississippi are way up the curve with your addressing AI in the state of Mississippi. I know you've got a great guy with Colin Napier working on that main program, Mississippi AI Network, where he has,
Yeah,
for a very small amount of money, put together a network to drive education into the constituent population of Mississippi. We're in the absence of even knowing Colin. I work on something called the Southern Regional Education Board AI and Education Commission, and Colin has been on there to speak to us a couple of times about what he's done, and it's pretty impressive. And I think that we're trying to do the same thing, Gerard. We're trying to educate the citizens of South Carolina on how to use AI. We don't believe that AI is going to replace jobs, but we do believe that people that are unable to use AI may be replaced by people who do. So that's
yeah,
one of the efforts that we're working on. But we're working in three areas basically. We're working on well, let me back up for just a second, if I could.
sure, sure.
Our guiding framework in South Carolina is something we call the 3Ps: to protect, promote, and pursue. And to protect is where we want to protect citizens from AI misuse. That's like deep fakes, scams, that sort of stuff. We want to promote AI's adoption across government, schools, and business, and we're working to try and make that happen. And then finally, we're pursuing growth by attracting innovation and investment in South Carolina. And I think that parallels the track that you guys are on. I don't see what you're doing as being a whole lot different than what we're doing in South Carolina. Maybe some individual efforts are a little bit different, but we're working with the colleges. We're working with the 9th through 12th grade. We're working with the elementary kids and the middle school kids that we're doing some pretty innovative stuff with. And on top of that, we are working to. We see a situation, and I don't know whether it's the same thing in Mississippi, but in South Carolina, I'm trying to protect the state from spending bits of money on AI in a siloed fashion. So you have this agency wants to spend $2 million. This agency wants to spend 1.9 million. This agency wants to spend 5. This agency wants to spend 8. And we're trying to coordinate all of that. And we're working on a combination investment across the state that all these different agencies will have access to, and we're pretty excited about that. We stand by for that. That announcement will be coming in the not too distant future. And then on top of that, we've got business initiatives that we're attempting to build out a marketplace where the issue, Gerard, with AI is the use cases where people need to know how to use it. So we're building a network of folks that are actively engaged in the use of AI and are willing to share how they're using it so that people can check in with that network and find ways that they can use and apply AI to their businesses. So we're working across education, government, and business to try and pick up the adoption of the use of AI. We talk a lot in South Carolina about applied AI. There are folks that are working on frontier AI, but we're focused on AI and becoming AI ready in the state.
Yeah, makes total sense. Representative Bradley, if you can hang on, we can keep talking about this. So we've got a break upon us right now. We got another segment that we can continue this discussion. Can you hang with us?
Happy, yes, sir.
All right, we got Representative Jeff Bradley from South Carolina. We're coming right back from the Element Wealth Studio. We're talking to Representative Jeff Bradley from the South Carolina House of Representatives discussing use of AI in government, trying to eliminate a lot of this duplicative regulation mess that we have in our states and our federal government as well. And yeah, it would be a powerful tool certainly for that purpose. What do your colleagues think about this, Representative Bradley?
Well, some of them get it and some of them don't. And I can't imagine it's any different than it is across the country. Some people are engaged with it and some people they're fearful of it. Some totally get it and understand that we need to address it. Like our Speaker of the House got it and appointed first, actually, it was the first standing committee in the country that dealt with AI. And so we're trying to make it happen.
Yeah. We have technology committees in our respective houses here in Mississippi. And, of course, as you can imagine, AI has been a central subject in their work and their efforts. And recently, this past session, they just formed an AI regulatory task force that consists of members of the legislature, including Colin Napier, who you also referenced earlier with the Mississippi Artificial Intelligence Network.
Aren't you on that task force as well?
I am. I was asked to be the sort of the business representative on that task force. I come from the IT industry and watched all this stuff evolve over the decades. Unfortunately, it got more mainstream, more practical, and more adopted after I sold my company. But, you could see this is where it was going. And I submit that what we did in our industry was build all this underlying infrastructure that makes this possible. It's all the networking, it's all the compute, it's all the storage, it's all the massive improvements in processing power that enable this technology. It's not anything new, as you know. This has been discussed and worked on for decades. We just didn't have the systems, the underlying compute and storage and network infrastructure that was powerful enough to support what you need to do anything that's useful with respect to AI. Right. Because if it takes days for it to return an answer, you're not likely to use it. But we have the technology now where it's, split seconds you get answers to complex questions it would take a human hours, days, months perhaps to research. So and again, our goal there is to try to establish some sort of reasonable framework that doesn't impede innovation. And I'm sure you guys are talking the same thing in South Carolina.
We are, Gerard, and what going around the country and going to these events on AI, what I've found, and this was probably no surprise to you, the red states are all about the innovation and not the restrictions and not the regulations. And the blue states are very much, their first thought is, how can I control this? And that,
so true,
quite frankly, concerns the major players in this field, because then they're going to have to stop what they're doing and parse out 50 different boxes of regulations on how they can innovate within their space. And we're trying to stop that. We're being deliberate about that. We're not trying to stop it, let's say, but we're very deliberate about that. I don't think that we as legislators know enough to be telling a developer what he should be doing. I think that culture will dictate to us some of the areas where we need to put effort as we go forward. And well, I like to tell people that there was a case in Massachusetts where a family had a child that used AI for a homework assignment, was failed as a result of it. The family sued the school district because there was no explicit instruction that one could not use AI. And so AI was used. And so that's a cultural thing that we might want to keep an eye on and see how that pans out, and watch for those sort of things. Early on in our process with the AI stuff, we called the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of South Carolina and asked him to come and sit down and talk with us. And we did. And he said, you know what? I think that what would make sense would be for y'all, for laws, Jeff, the first thing you ought to consider doing is the real clearly criminal stuff, and stay away from the other stuff the liability stuff, because we have a lot of smart lawyers in South Carolina that can work out those liability issues. Let's focus on taking the bad guys out of the equation, and that's what we're doing. We're looking at things like deep fake porn, child morphing of images, and scams and things like that.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, Jeff, honestly, and you're probably familiar with Tennessee, maybe one of the first states to pass any form of AI regulation. And, of course, Tennessee being home to lots of performing artists, that's one of the first things they said is that it's essentially illegal to duplicate or mimic someone's voice and use that, for an asset that you could sell, where you're essentially copying, a human voice that is popular and is an asset. That made total sense to me. That was one of the first things. And that's what I would consider to be nefarious, wrong use of the technology. Yep. It really doesn't produce any value. It's just somebody using it as a scam to get rich, honestly.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's kind of where we're focused. And then, again, the other side of it is to allow it to run and bring to us the benefits from the innovation that it represents.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think you sound like a person that is very much in favor of the technology and completely appreciates and understands the value it could provide to society. And I'm not sure there's an aspect of our civilization where there's not an application, if you think about it, because what you're essentially doing is emulating human intelligence.
Well, and that's where the opportunities lie, if we can figure out how to use this tool to improve the outcome of the work that we're doing. We're pretty excited. I know you're probably running out of time. Let me tell you real quickly, we're working with state agencies where we think that we're not talking about getting rid of people, but as people roll off in retirement, if we can make up the difference in their workload with AI, there's millions of dollars worth of savings at each agency in the state of South Carolina over the years. And we have 70 agencies, so we're thinking there's $200 million worth of savings every year going off into the future. And that's right. Pretty exciting stuff.
I don't know if you're familiar, Representative Bradley, with the company Shopify. It's an online selling platforms, Canadian-based company. The CEO of that company, Tobias Lutke is his name. He's one of my favorite CEOs. He just issued a policy a couple of months ago, maybe even not that long ago, that said, hey, any new request for employees, you must prove that AI can't perform that job before you can hire them. That's something maybe we ought to think about in government.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good plan. That's a good plan. So that's kind of what we're looking at in South Carolina.
Well, that makes sense.
You don't have to find people in the process. It's just not replacing them when they leave. And on top of that, Gerard, what you have is if you can take some of that monotonous burden off your state employees and they are able to do work that is valued as a human.
That's right.
They like it better. There's less turnover, and you got a better customer service delivery as well.
No doubt about it. Any task that's repetitive and doesn't require human skill. I mean, there's some things that AI just simply can't do. Requires the abilities of humans to discern. That's perfectly fine. But if it's a repetitive task that doesn't require that, it's a candidate for being done by AI, and we should think about do that. And that frees up that person to do more meaningful, productive, valuable work. I mean, it makes total sense to me. We got to apply that same standard in government. Businesses are doing this right now. They're applying that approach right now. Yep. And it makes sense in government.
And we have a handful of initiatives that we don't have time to get into right now that are trying to do the exact same thing. So I'm really anxious to see how that works.
Well, that certainly applauds you for that. Do you see this? You made a great point. The red states are trying to figure out a way to utilize this technology and implement common sense regulatory framework that protects people but doesn't preclude innovation. That's a great point. And, again, I applaud you for it. Representative Jeff Bradley from the South Carolina House of Representatives has been our guest. Appreciate it, Representative Bradley. Thanks for coming on.
You're welcome. Good to talk to you. Talk soon.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Folks, we're stepping aside for a break. We got half an hour of middays remaining. Stay